Today on Total Maine, a fiery first presidential debate. Our In the Arena panel breaks down the face-off between President Biden and former President Trump. Honoring Artie, hear from the father of a man killed in the Lewiston mass shootings, now calling for gun control. And Community Champion, meet the Portland organization helping new Mainers learn the English language. Hey, good Sunday, and thank you so much for joining us here on Total Maine this final day in the month of June, if you can believe it. I'm Terry Stackhouse. The first presidential debate of this campaign cycle is now in the books. You saw it Thursday night right here on Channel 8. Today, a closer look at what was said between President Joe Biden and former President Donald Trump and what's next. We're joined today by In the Arena podcast hosts Pat Callahan, Ethan Strimling, and Phil Harriman.
Thanks, Terry. This was the earliest presidential debate we've ever seen, and President Joe Biden wanted it that way. Ordinarily, incumbents are not eager to debate because they've already got the job, but he wanted to show that he still has the mental acuity and the energy and the willpower to continue this job for 4 more years. Ethan, you're a Democrat, just as Joe Biden is. Did he succeed in that?
I don't think he did, and I'm very disappointed about that. Look, I supported this decision. I think it was a good idea, having a debate early. We're going to have the whole summer. We're not going to be talking about this. Let him come out and show who he was at the State of the Union address. But he came out, he's like over-prepared. He was distracted a little bit. It seemed like he was wandering around. He sort of fed some of the image that's out there about him, that he's kind of not all there, and that was not healthy at the beginning.
You know, I think President Biden went into this thinking that this was a good idea just to solidify his Democratic base and to appeal to these swing states that are in play. And I think he missed the mark tonight. I agree with Ethan. He didn't seem to be sharp. He didn't seem to be in command of the facts, and he confused millions and billions and other moments where people were saying, gee, this is the leader of the free world. I'm not sure this is going to work.
On the other hand, Donald Trump, perhaps the stakes a little bit lower in that his supporters are already pretty solidly with him. Did he do anything to bring anybody who might be on the fence over to his side?
We'll find out in the days ahead, but my instincts tell me he did, because he wasn't name-calling and a bully and other things that we have seen from him in the past, where people are like tuning him out because his rhetoric is so irritating. I think he overcame that tonight.
I don't think he brought any new people to his side. I think his people are solid. They're there. I think what we're going to see in polls is there going to be some softening of Biden's support, that he's going to have to get back after tonight. I think that, Trump did what Trump had to do. There's not a lot of players out there who are still coming to Trump. His path to victory is bringing Biden down, and I think Biden will fade a little bit after this. Plenty of time to try to pick it up again, and he needs to.
Let's talk about a few of the issues that were covered. The economy, of course, was job one, so to speak. Who do you think scored on that?
Well, this was the first question of the night, and this is where Biden seemed the most confused or lost or trying to figure out where he was going. The economy should be a strength for him, right? Our unemployment rate is as low as it's ever been. The economic growth is great. The stock market is great. Inflation has slowed. These are things that he should be much stronger at, and he was not as good tonight as I wanted him to be. I think he's going to be making that case going forward.
Bill?
I think as someone who spent most of his career in Washington, he's listened to all the economic advisors that are telling him things are trending in the right direction. I don't think that connected on Main Street. People are going to the gas pump and the grocery store, and they're not feeling what President Biden was saying tonight.
A lot of discussion on the overturning of Roe versus Wade, which President Trump has taken credit for, and what women's rights should be. Who do you think picked up points on that?
Well, I think President Biden probably carried the day. People who are that issue voter, hearing President Biden say, if I'm reelected, I'm going to make it a federal law again. If you vote on that issue, you probably are voting for Biden. Trump said, it's back where the states are in charge of these decisions, and we're seeing that play out as we speak.
Ethan?
Yeah, when you say that issue voter, most Americans, that is one of their top priorities. So I think this is going to be an issue that's obviously very important to the American people, as we've seen in elections ever since Roe v. Wade was overturned. And I think Trump really flopped on that tonight, just failed. Record was wrong. He was speaking things that didn't have anything to do with what was reality about women's health care. And I think, his trying to claim that people wanted it to go back to the states and now states are banning it across the country. That is not the way the American people want it.
A lot of discussion on foreign policy, including much of it on Ukraine. What's your takeaway from that talk?
A strength for Biden tonight, for sure. I think the issue about Putin, driving into Ukraine and then going to Poland and Hungary and moving around Eastern Europe along the border of Russia, I think that really, that is something people were hearing because Trump has kind of been, has placated Putin in the sense of said, hey, he can do what he wants to do. Somebody else needs to pay for NATO, and that's not what the American people want.
Yeah, I see that one a little differently. I think, after $200 billion of U.S. money going into Ukraine, we need to have a clear path to a resolution. I don't think President Biden delivered that tonight. And President Trump was basically saying, look, at the NATO countries who are bordering this issue, they need to step up and pay their fair share. And his point was, I got them to step up and do their share. We need a resolution to this. I didn't hear from either one of them what the path to the solution is.
Plenty of jabs were thrown back and forth. What sticks out in your mind as who landed punches where?
Well, I think it's always easier for the challenger to go after the incumbent, and I think on all of the issues, whether it was Afghanistan, the fentanyl crisis, the open border, the inflation, Trump clearly got more punches in. But I would also criticize Trump. He avoided many of the questions that the moderators asked, particularly about child care, about health care issues. He and the fentanyl issue, he avoided answering.
And maybe the moderators dropped the ball a little bit on that. There were times it seemed like, let's guide them back to the actual question.
Yeah, I know. I know you're not the political analyst here, but I do want to ask you, because I was very frustrated by the moderators tonight that they didn't step in a little more. And I mean, they would let them just go on and then come back to the question, then let them not answer it again. And I don't know what a moderator is supposed to do there, but maybe you can give us a little insight on that.
You can try to guide them, and they might tell you request denied, but at least they'd be on the record for it, and that has happened. But I think you also could have allowed more give and take between the two of them. I know the rules were strict: 2 minutes here, mic off, 2 minutes there, then the mic's off. So with that, but any punches that landed that before we go that you can that you'll remember?
Yes, I think there were a few. The golf game interaction, I just want to say, was just absurd.
That was the low point here.
When Trump started going there, I was like, oh my God, this is terrible. And then Biden went there too and tried to compare his handicap. I was like, oh my God. But Biden's best of the night, I think, was when he was going after Trump about the crimes and being indicted and being now found guilty, being a felon, and him talking about sleeping with a porn star and sort of going through owing, hundreds of millions of dollars because you sexually harassed a woman, et cetera. So I think that stuff was strongest.
We'll see how it plays out in the days and weeks to come. Terry?
All right, thanks so much to the three of you. In the Arena is now on summer hiatus, but they're going to return again this fall. If you want to get caught up on all of the episodes of In the Arena, they're available right now on WMTW.com. You can listen wherever you get your podcasts. If you live in Portland and haven't stocked up on those purple trash bags, you might want to do that today. Next on Total Maine, the price increase that has some residents seeing sticker shock. But first, a Maine father who lost his son in the Lewiston mass shootings is now on a mission to stop gun violence. We sit down with Arthur Bernard about his cause when Total Maine returns.